And thank you everyone for coming along today and attending. I'm going to tell you just very briefly about me. My name is Gordon McCrorie. I am a bit of a science geek and I've studied exercise and health science. I'm a life coach. I deal with, I guess, resilience on a day-to-day basis. And so, yeah, I want to talk to you today about resilience and I guess the title of the presentation, The Secret to a Happy Life in Uncertain Times. And clearly we are in uncertain times. So let's just kind of kick off. Start off with the kind of the presentation goal. Three kind of main things. I want you to get from this presentation knowledge and understanding that will allow you to control feelings and thoughts. You're going to see as we go through how important your feelings and thoughts are to resilience, so that you can work towards this bulletproof resilience. It's just a bit of jargon, but really kind of a rock solid kind of resilience. Looking at the most impactful areas that you can improve upon to develop kind of a plan for resilience and come up with very specific to you next steps. And I also hope that kind of through sharing this information that you actually feel in some way empowered and actually go and take action. Your resilience is not going to get better as a result of learning about this stuff. It's actually going to be about doing it. So I've purposefully at the end kind of just will finish off with, okay, what could you do and get you to reflect back? So these are the main goals of the presentation. In terms of how we're going to cover that, we're going to start off at kind of this kind of macro level and look at the main things that affect resilience, but really zooming right out and I'm looking at the big picture stuff. And that's going to include our physiology, neurophysiology, what's going on inside our brain, but also what's going on inside our body, or kind of our physiology there, because that's got a big impact. So brain and body, massive to resilience. And then not only our brain, but our mind, where our thoughts and our beliefs are held, and what's going on there in terms of our psychology. So physiology, psychology are going to be kind of some of the kind of macro level stuff that we're going to look at. And then coming in a little bit and thinking, right, what are the most impactful things you can do to improve your resilience? Importantly, because this is a balancing act, what are the things that you're currently doing which are eroding your resilience? And then lastly, of course, get started on this plan so that you can get going from now and have better resilience. So that's the kind of contents. As a top level, I talked about this zooming out, this macro perspective. And so this is how I think about resilience, or what's affecting it. So as a starting point, of course, we've got things that are going on in the environment. And sometimes these are of our own creation, sometimes they're nothing to do with us. But things are going on, and these things are affecting our physiology, both neurophysiology, kind of what's going on in our brain, but also what's going on in our body, our feelings and our emotions. Those feelings and emotions are trickling down or directly feeding our psychology, the thoughts and stories that we tell ourselves. Put simply, if we feel good, we're going to think good. If we feel bad, we're going to think bad typically. And the reason that I wanted to share this at a top level is so that you get the idea that this cascade has got a hierarchy. And if you try and go in at a psychology level, then it very often will be ineffective, because if you're feeling terrible, you're not going to believe the stories that you're telling yourself. So it's physiology first, psychology second, and environment driving all of that. If we've got the environment through physiology, through psychology, then kind of once we've told ourselves a story, we're either taking action or we're not taking any action, and that has an outcome, that has a result. Although this looks in the first instance like it's all kind of feeding down the way, there's constant feedback loops throughout this. So once you've taken some action and got an outcome, you get some kind of biofeedback from that. So you feel differently, and your story then starts to kind of be affected by that too. So there's very much an active process going on, and we want it to get into a very positive process rather than one that's just negative and spiraling down the way. When it comes to environment and us being able to alter environment kind of to our advantage, I split it up into 6 different areas. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in these 6 different areas. Kind of there's going to be a link to a number of presentations, small presentations afterwards that will allow you to dig into more depth on some of these areas should you wish. But just as a quick overview, I tend to look at how can I influence my environment. Here's 6 generic areas. Inner is really all about what's coming into us, kind of from a sensory perspective. So everything we see is affecting us, everything we hear, everything we eat, everything we smell, everything we taste, everything we touch. So anything at all that's coming in is having an impact. So seeing and hearing obviously being kind of some of the key ones. And that affects anything that affects how we feel. In fact, although I can't see it because my screen's covered, if I click that, it should, I think it will say some kind of music playlist or something along those lines. And the idea being that if we put on a piece of music, that's something that's happening in our environment. It's affecting how we feel. If we put on, I'm not kind of going to do great with my musical taste here, but if we put on something like Destiny's Child Survivor or Rocky Eye of the Tiger type thing, we might feel very strong, and that has a physiological impact that trickles down and kind of in terms of our thoughts. Whereas if I this is perhaps oversharing, but if I've been dumped in the past, and perhaps I have, and I'm listening to too much David Gray or Damien Rice or something like that, it's very woe is me, and that has an impact. So everything we're doing is having an impact kind of on how we're feeling, how we're thinking, and of course, that's having a massive impact on our resilience. So we want to be very aware of that. What am I doing in that level? I won't spend loads of time on the others, but we've got outer, and that's really kind of, it's almost kind of self-care as an environment. It's like, have I taken time doing my hair or looking after my skin or doing my nails, or kind of things like even going for a shower and noticing nice shower gel, kind of, or the smell of it. All of these things, some of them are very little things, but they all are having an impact on us. Same for projected. Projected is how we show up in the world. So what clothes we wear, if we wear clothes that make us feel really good, we get this physiological kind of response to that, and that improves how we think. If we sit at home all day in our joggies because we're now working from home, then that will also affect how we feel and how we think. So lots of these things are having an impact. They seem like small things, but they're all important. I'll not go too much into the other ones, but there's a presentation on that. But the idea here being environment, both out with our control, something like coronavirus, and within our control, these 6, allow us to influence how we're feeling and how we're thinking, and massively therefore impact on resilience. So that's an overview. That's a kind of zooming right out, physiology, psychology, how all of that works. Next, I want to look at kind of the brain physiology, what's going on kind of there. And I'm looking at this first because this is the part that deals with threat and stress in the environment. And I'm sure there will be some people in the audience that have seen presentations I've done before on this type of thing. But for those that haven't, there's a little region in the brain called the amygdala. It's the threat center, and it sets hedonic tone. Hedonic tone is how we see the world. It's a filter of how we see the world. It creates your own version of reality, but it is not reality as such. It's just how you're seeing the world. Everyone is seeing the world a little bit differently. And that hedonic tone is influenced by what's going on inside of you, what your physiology is like. So again, if you're feeling good, your hedonic tone is better. If you're feeling worse, your hedonic tone is worse. Hedonic tone is always altering, kind of both subtly and sometimes massively. It's based on how many stresses you've got in your environment, if you like. And a simple example of hedonic tone getting altered negatively is if you've had a terrible night's sleep, then when you wake up in the morning, you just want to get to the end of the day. And everything that you're faced with is harder. And it's because hedonic tone's changed. And it's also because energy's changed, which we'll come to. But I want you to kind of really remember that you're creating your own reality. There is no reality as such. It's stories you're making up in your head affected by your physiology. And so knowing that hedonic tone is really important to how we see the world, and how we see the world is like, think of it like a glass half full, glass half empty. If we know that that's really important, then a great question is, how can I improve my hedonic tone, this invisible filter, so that I can feel better in the moment and improve my chances of kind of making progress here. And so with that in mind, there's a central question that this part of the brain is trying to answer, and it is, can I predict a favorable outcome? It seems really simple, but if you think about that, there's three potential answers to that question. It's like, yes, I can, in which case the brain really settles down, you settle down, you feel good. No, I can't, in which case we've got some kind of distress or threat, or we're not sure. But that's the key thing we want to be aware of. Our brain is always asking, can I predict a favorable outcome? And with something like coronavirus is a key example, it's like, it's very hard to know when that kind of predictable outcome is going to come. Apologies, everybody. You might hear a buzzer in the background. It was always going to be the case that it'd be mine that would go. So fingers crossed that will stop soon. I've left the doors open. So can we predict a favorable outcome? If the answer to that question is no, and it can be in any areas in life, then we go into fight, flight, freeze. It might be easier for me to actually just press and open that door. Give me 1 second, people. This is going to really not ideal, but straight back. Well, there's an example of fight, flight, or freeze. That's the first time I've had to leave a presentation in the middle of it. So let's pick up on that. So apologies, everybody. So stress response, which I'm currently now personally experiencing, very good example of it. You go into fight, flight, or freeze. The types of stressors that we're all experiencing can be physical, they can be mental, or they can be emotional. So physical, ill health would be a great example, lack of sleep, a great example, high or low blood sugar, other examples of kind of stress. Mental stressors would be things like your brain being too busy, really foggy thinking would be another one. And it crosses over a little bit into emotional when we have got really poor quality thinking, really kind of pessimistic, if you like, very doom and gloom. Emotional examples of emotional stressors, you'd be looking at, where do I fit? Do I feel safe? Do I feel loved? Where am I in my hierarchy at work, for example, or in my tribe? These are all areas where if things aren't good, we're going into stress and threat, and kind of and various different things happen, which we're going to talk about. In addition to the physical, the mental, and the emotional stressors, we've got these broad categories of things that are really useful to know about if we're not feeling how we want to be feeling or not thinking how we want to think. We want to ask ourselves questions such as, okay, what's going too fast? Because things that go too fast causes problems. Things that go too slow, the same. What's uncertain? What's overwhelming? And so you can, again, I'm sure most of us are experiencing some of these on a day-to-day basis as things change with coronavirus. Things are going too fast or slow or uncertain or overwhelming. And so we can start to skillfully think, right, well, which of them are present here and what can I do? How can I slow this down? Or how can I speed this up? Or how can I get more certainty here? And if it's something like overwhelm, how can I break it down into smaller parts, bite-sized chunks, and put most of it to the side and work on one thing at a time? So dealing with that skillfully. The problem with stress is, not the problem with it, stress causes the amygdala to release cortisol. Cortisol's job is to make us feel bad so that it gets our attention. And over prolonged periods of time, that's going to be exhausting. And so when we're looking at resilience and things like burnout, then persistent stress is going to be problematic because of this release of cortisol, amongst other things. Not only does it feel unpleasant when we're under stress and threat, we're not very good at controlling our own thinking. So the amygdala, this part of the brain again, hijacks our focus and puts it and directs it onto the stresses. So someone that's normally perfectly positive can become very negative and not see the wood for the trees. And that's because they're losing control of their focus consciously, because another part of their brain that's really kind of deep-seated and strong can hijack it. Where we focus and what we're focused on really massively influences our emotional states, and our emotional states massively then influence our thinking. If we think back to the cascade kind of that we had with the kind of the arrows with the environment through physiology, kind of one of the previous slides. So anything that's kind of that's getting in the way of kind of our thinking and our focus is going to be a real problem. So just continuing on a little bit more with this kind of physiology thing. So when you're thinking about resilience and you're looking at the first component, you've got to look at the stresses that you're experiencing, and you cannot ignore them. You don't need to solve all the problems fully, but you must have some kind of plan and you must be taking action. And again, if you're taking action, you're going to be getting outcomes, and that outcome is going to create this positive feedback loop. And that's going to help you feel a bit more hopeful, a bit more positive. So your hedonic tone, how you see the world, is going to really improve when you take action and get some progress. Really importantly, no amount of positive thinking or burying your head in the sand is going to overcome not dealing with threats. You've got to, that's your first level thing. It's like, what are the threats? What do I need to do here? And take action. Positive thinking is useful, but it won't be good enough to kind of to give you the resilience that you'll be after. And you won't be able to keep it up. It'll just feel too hard. And you'll know that you're lying to yourself. Remember that you're creating your own reality from the stories that are going on inside your own head. We're going to come to how we can change them a bit later. And also, I've talked about kind of our emotional states in earlier slides, and I've obviously focused here on controlling focus. It's really worthwhile to consider that they are both skills you can develop. Our emotional states are not purely kind of, they don't always have to come from the environment. We can actually choose and develop them, and I'm going to show you how. And equally so, we can learn to get better at controlling our focus. And again, in this presentation, I'm going to show you how. So let's start off with, how do we create kind of some positive emotions? So humans have got kind of, there's lots of different models for this, but this is one of my favorites, kind of Tony Robbins' 6 human needs. And he talks about how we have this need for certainty. We can see with coronavirus again that certainty is really problematic. It's very hard to predict this favorable outcome, but humans need it. They also need variety. Coronavirus has again affected that pleasant variety that we've got. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're getting plenty of change, but not necessarily change in variety that we want. Humans need love and connection. They need to spend time with loved ones. Coronavirus is adversely making that more difficult. We need significance. We need to feel important in some way. We need progress, and we need purpose. Now, the reason that I'm putting these up is because if you're not feeling how you want to be feeling, something or some of these are going to give you kind of a way that you can improve it. So, in fact, actually, but before we go into that, I'll kind of mention some of the chemicals that are involved in them as well. So certainty, for example, when we don't have enough certainty, we get a rise in cortisol. And I mentioned earlier, cortisol makes us feel bad. When we don't have enough variety, again, simultaneously, we're a bit bored, cortisol rises. So we're not feeling how we want to feel if we don't have the certainty or we don't have the variety. So you can look at these things and think, right, well, how am I measuring up on those, and what could I do to improve them? Love and connection. When we are experiencing love and connection, we get this hit of oxytocin. Oxytocin is something that bonds mammals together, and it's massively important. Interestingly, when we're in threat, when we're under threat and we're having a tough time, we want to pull away from everybody, but it's the worst thing you can do, because that puts us into another level of threat. We need this oxytocin, we need this connection. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but don't pull away. kind of lean in and kind of make it more of a priority to spend time with people that care about you. Significance in serotonin. Again, antidepressants are often selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And really what they're doing is keeping serotonin levels higher in us so that we feel better. So if we feel significant in some way, we get a hit of serotonin, we get to feel good. Progress is dopamine. And so again, we want to be feeling like we're making progress in things. And we all know that when we're making progress, that kind of reassures us in some way and we settle down a bit. And the last of the 6 is purpose. And how purpose is, or why purpose is so important, is because, again, when we're looking at resilience, it's a balancing act. If you're overwhelmed with ill feelings and high levels of cortisol, for example, and very little oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, then you're not going to be very resilient for very long. You're going to kind of be getting worse kind of at a pretty rapid rate. But if you can put in plenty of oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine, that helps to balance it out. What purpose does is it amplifies the presence of these positive feeling chemicals, for example. Best example I can give you of that is, let's say I was to paint a fence, and I'm not interested in painting fences, but I was to paint it, and someone gave me some kind of praise on that. I might get a little bit of serotonin from that, but not very much at all, because it's not purposeful to me, it's not important. Whereas if I was to paint a fence, but I really loved painting fences, and then I got the same praise, then I would get much more serotonin, I would feel much better. So purpose amplifies whichever chemicals. So if you can define what's important to you right now, and then experience connection with that, or progress in that area, or do a good job in that area, you will be far more resilient than if you don't know what your purpose is. So purpose is a really big deal when it comes to resilience. Just exploring kind of some of these kind of ways that we can get these chemical feelings that we're after, that may help us feel better, that help us keep going. That little kind of image kind of just shows this idea of isolation, and I think that's the thing that we absolutely want to avoid. This one kind of hopefully is more of a kind of smiley image. We can see kind of this concept of just getting together and feeling closely connected. I mentioned it causes a release of oxytocin. The obvious examples of connection are our relationships with our friends and our family and our colleagues in our community. And they're hard just now, but we do need to kind of like get creative on that. The one I wanted to just spend just a little bit of time on is the relationship we have with ourselves, and how kind we are to ourselves. I think that almost everyone that I speak to, not absolutely everyone, but almost everybody that I speak to is hard on themselves. That causes a problem for oxytocin, and that causes a problem for serotonin. They're both they're going to go lower as a result of that. We're not going to feel very significant if we're giving ourselves a really hard time. That will deplete resilience. Equally so, if anyone else was giving you a hard time, then your cortisol would be rising because you wouldn't feel very certain in the presence of that person. So your relationship with yourself is really, really important, and how you talk to yourself is really important. And we'll come on to a few areas as to how you can improve that. But just think just now, how do you talk to yourself, and how does that compare to how you would talk to someone that you care about? And if there's a big difference, you want to look to be changing that. Another thing that stress and threat does to us, as I mentioned, it makes us pull away from everybody and everything at times because we're exhausted and we can't face them and we don't feel like we've got the energy. But actually, it's, as I've mentioned, it's the worst thing you can do, because when we get stressed and in threat, we become very me. And that's not helpful. We want to be connected to others. So if you can think, who can I help, and go and do something along those lines, you will feel better for doing that. You'll get some oxytocin, you'll get some serotonin, and these will really balance out kind of the cortisol from the uncertainty. So connection's important. Progress Progress is kind of massively important. That kind of relates primarily to dopamine, but if it's progress and things that matter, then it's serotonin and amplified. Progress is what we're after. I mean, we must be seeing that as we kind of like, we get a challenge, we make some progress, it improves hope, it just keeps us going. We need these little bits of progress. So we want to look for that. Now, it isn't always, sometimes we can't get progress in one area. So sometimes work's really hard. So it's helpful to have other things that we can be doing. We can be looking at progress from an outcome perspective. Again, take something like kind of coronavirus just now. How do we get the outcome? We don't know. Kind of, that's out with our control. But what can we do that's moving in the right direction? Maybe process goals might be kind of really useful. Another thing kind of I find kind of really useful kind of for progress is, let's say we're not getting let's say someone was furloughed as an example. If they did a course, they have a way of getting some progress, whereas otherwise they might just have this void and not be feeling kind of particularly good. And of course, progress in things that matter will kind of like get amplified, but it's making progress improves hope, gives you a dopamine hit, helps you be more resilient. Another thing that I think is kind of worth considering at this time is what winning was before coronavirus and what winning is currently are two very different things, but your brain doesn't actually know that. It still thinks winning is what it used to be. So we kind of would do well to look at, right, well, what's winning right now? What would be a good day right now? And redefine that. And you need to do that consciously, otherwise you might be doing pretty well, but not recognizing that you're doing pretty well. So given the circumstances, what is winning right now? And then kind of one of the ways that I kind of like can bring attention to progress is daily journaling. And what I'll do with that is I will, at the beginning of the week, think, right, what's important to me this week? So setting my priorities. And then as I'm going through the week, how am I getting on? And then at the end of the week, how did I do with that? Looking at that progress, normally what we do is we look at what did I do badly, but looking at that progress can help buffer us and help us feel that we're going in the right direction. So I think journaling's a good way to squeeze in a little bit of extra juice out of the progress aspect of this. Purpose or meaning. Well, there's this idea, if you like, that this threat problem, this resilience thing is a central nervous system problem. So you are too much in the sympathetic side. This is going to get a bit jargony, but only very briefly, bear with me. If we're too much in the sympathetic side, we're going to move towards burnout. We're going to be very stressed. It's not good. Or we can be in the parasympathetic side. The more reactive we are, kind of constantly, the more prone we are to burnout. The more purposeful we are, the more prone we are to be centered and be able to keep going. And part of the reason for that is, as I explained earlier, we get much greater positive hits from doing something purposefully than from doing the same thing reactively. So it's important that we're purposeful. So what's your purpose right now? What matters to you? What's the most important couple of things, and zero in on those. A really interesting experiment kind of on meaningful work in relation to resilience. I think it was GPs, it was certainly doctors, and they were allowed to spend 20% of their time on work they considered purposeful. In that experiment, that group of doctors experienced half the burnout of those that didn't have that choice. So being able to work on purpose, on the things that matter most, has a real big positive impact on resilience. To help bring purpose to a daily kind of way of looking at it, it's like, what would make today a good day? That can be your purpose. When you can't see the bigger picture, what about today? And if you can do that, you can then give yourself a bit of praise, and that would improve this oxytocin that you get, because you're giving yourself significance, you're paying attention to what you did well. Although I'm not religious, kind of, I guess I am spiritual to a point. I think that when it comes to, again, doing well in tough times, it's got to be about more than ourselves. So we want to think bigger than ourselves. We want to try and help others. That kind of, when we get outside of ourselves and kind of connect more with humanity, or a cause or something that really matters, then that's really important for purpose. Other things we could look at, other ways of improving our resilience. Well, health and well-being seems like a fairly obvious one. I mentioned that threat and stress earlier on, what related to physical stressors or mental stressors or emotional stressors. So how are we caring for our physical or mental and emotional health? I'm going to talk kind of more about mental health kind of and some of the things we can do there, but physical health, I think most of us know some of the things that we need to be doing there. Emotional health is very much connection based. Energy and resilience, massively kind of obviously massively linked. Resilience is when we feel we just can't go on anymore. How could we improve our energy? Some of the things to improve energy are quite obvious, if you like. How do we get better sleep? What about our nutrition, our diet? If we can keep our blood sugar stable and keep the energy coming in, then it's much better than if we go all day on coffee and don't kind of nourish ourselves. So caring for ourselves, looking after our health, because we're the most important thing so that we can deliver whatever it is we want to deliver. So we have to take care of ourselves, and things like energy, sleep, diet, exercise are all really important to keep us in the best shape to weather the storms that are coming at us. I've mentioned endorphins here. They're the kind of the fourth, and didn't put them in one of the previous models. They didn't fit well. But when we're looking at things that help us feel good, endorphins are fantastic for that. They're actually nature's painkiller. So we want to be getting some of that, and pain is psychological and as well as physical and emotional, of course. So the endorphins really, they serve as a painkiller. We forget about the pain that we're feeling or the difficulties we're under when we're exercising. I wanted to mention something else on that. The type of exercise you do is really important. I like strength training as an example because it can help me feel strong, and feeling strong physically can help you with feeling strong kind of if you like emotionally. But strength training is certainly not for everyone. What you want to avoid is exercise that makes you feel bad, or exercise that exhausts you. When you're already having a tough time, then maybe the version of exercise that I'm talking about here is something like going for a walk and getting out in nature. But you've got to move. Humans are designed to move, and certain forms of exercise will really release tension, release stress. So walking, running, kind of the high intensity stuff's good, but so is yoga. But doing some kind of movement. Nowadays, a lot of us are working from home and not moving very much. A walk before work or a walk at lunchtime, and it doesn't need to be for very long, can change your hedonic tone. It can change how you see the world, and just gets you feeling a bit better. So some of the kind of key things I wanted you to kind of pick up from there is that you've got your emotional state. Yes, it can be affected by what's going kind of on outside of you, but there's a lot of things you can do if you focus on connection, or you focus on making some progress, or purpose on doing something that helps you feel significant, or you focus on purpose. There's a lot you can do that change your emotional states. And your experience of life is to a large extent based on what your good to bad feelings ratio is. So we can overwhelm the unpleasant with pleasant feelings. And I think that when it comes to feelings, thinking of it a bit like a cocktail, where the cortisol, the unpleasant, is maybe kind of like a tequila, which is a kind of an alcohol that I don't enjoy. But if we put in other pleasant tasting chemicals around that, we don't notice the effect of it. So it's very much within your control to make life taste better, feel better, if you like. And the more positive states you can generate consistently, the better your resilience is going to be, because it's the absence of these positive experiences that just is going to kind of let us just sink down further and further and further. So there's things we can do to affect our emotions. So we've gone over physiology. I want to now look at kind of what goes on in the brain. or when I say the brain, I'm kind of now thinking more of the mind, and I want to look at focus, and I want to look at how we think. So focus is really important. Thinking all the way back to kind of one of the earliest slides, we were talking about the amygdala controlling focus and making us focus on the negatives and that kind of having problems for us, because it generates more negative feelings. For me, most people don't know how to control focus. They're not in control of their own mind. And if you're not in control of your own mind, you're not in control of your own feelings. What I've found is that the most effective way to learn to control focus is through practicing meditation. And really all that is, kind of its simplest form, would be sitting down and trying to focus on your breathing. Your brain is going to dash off somewhere else, and your job is simply to notice that and to bring it back. And as you get better at noticing and bringing it back, that's you learning to control your focus. And focus is obviously the thing then that's allowing you to direct your attention onto whatever is useful for you to be thinking about. Meditation, kind of in addition to helping you control focus, it also reduces the size of the amygdala. So that kind of, we know this clinically, reduces the size of the amygdala and reduces its grip it has on controlling your mind and your thinking, if you like, or influencing your thinking. And it therefore, also improves this hedonic tone, this filter of how we see the world. So we settle down, we become less stressed as a result of meditation. There's a very direct link there. Some of my favorites that I would look at when we are kind of in high stress situations, metta meditation's all about love and kindness, really connecting to a very powerful emotion, and it's about connection. So looking kind of for on YouTube or Spotify or within some of the meditation apps I'll mention, kind of metta meditations, loving kindness meditations, sometimes known as mountain meditations. Mountain is guided meditation, and again, I'll make sure that you've all got a link to one of these, where you picture yourself as this very strong, very stable, never changing kind of entity. And it really kind of, it changes your physiology again. It can let you feel just very, very secure. So these are a couple of good examples that can be found on YouTube, or I'll give you links. But also meditation can specifically target any negative emotion, whether it's fear or anxiety or worry or depression, meditation or anger. Meditation, kind of, there are meditations specifically that will help with each of these. And great places to start if you've not tried already. All of them are available in free free versions. Headspace, Calm, Insight Time are some of my favorites. And I think that the purpose of the important part here is that this control of focus is massively important to how you're feeling, and whatever you focus on or are focusing on is what's going to grow. So ask yourself just now, where is your focus often going? How is it high quality? Are you focusing on all the problems, or are you focusing on what you want the outcomes to be and what you can do? Because it makes a big difference to your experience. Moving on from focus and actually looking specifically at thinking and improving the quality of our thinking. First thing I want to draw attention to whenever we're facing anything is that when we think of things, we often have beliefs, but beliefs are not facts. And we forget that. So we just basically think, right, that's a thought I've had, that's true. We think all our thoughts are true, and most of them aren't, or at least maybe not most, but many of them aren't. So you want to question what you believe. I want to think about, what do you think about yourself and self-belief? Because when it comes to, let's say, that central question, can I predict a favorable outcome? Well, can I predict a favorable outcome relative to kind of and your self-belief? If you've got really high self-belief, then you're likely to think, yes, I can predict a favorable outcome. And if you've got really high self-belief, you're going to think, I can predict a favorable outcome. So you're not going to be as stressed by things that come up. And And I think that's a thing that meditation's really helped me with. Well, meditation and learning how to develop habits. Because if you know that, okay, you don't know how to do something, but you can learn how to do it, then just about anything you can now handle, your self-belief gets better. And also, what do you believe about the circumstances? And are these beliefs, are they helpful or are they unhelpful? Because if they're unhelpful, how can we change them? Think about your mindset. How do you experience it? It is different in different areas. But are you fixed or growth mindset? Do you do you think, no, I can't do that, or no, there will be a way? Are you naturally optimistic or pessimistic? And when I say naturally, how are you just now? Is it shifting a little bit? How do you shift it back? When it comes to mindset, I would be looking at Carol Dweck's work. Got a great book, kind of mindset. When it comes to optimism, I'd be looking at Martin Seligman. Learned Optimism has a couple of great books you can read, and I'm sure there's going to be YouTube videos on that too. For me, when I'm looking to improve my thinking, a lot of what's creating the distress inside is going back to that kind of that internal self-talk. So here's my 3 rules for it that is worthwhile kind of like thinking of, and then kind of compare and contrast that to your own. So are the stories I'm telling myself true and helpful and kind? It's got to meet all 3 criteria, or we want to come up with a better thought. We must all have been in meetings where someone's come up with something that's true but not helpful. And we've got an outcome that we want to get to. So true on its own is not good enough. We need true and helpful, in other words, that will be useful to get to the goal that we want to get to, and kind in that it won't cause you some form of distress the way that you speak to yourself. So if you think you're really hard on yourself, for example, I'd be really tempted to start writing those thoughts down and then question them and think, how can I repattern that? How can I make sure that it's true and helpful and kind? And it's not that you don't have the skill to do this. Most of you do this to friends and family all the time. It's just the way you speak to yourself that's problematic. And it's massively detrimental from a resilience perspective if you're really hard on yourself, because you can't get away from you. So saying things that are true and helpful and kind are really important. Another way of improving your thinking, I do this via my journaling, is to develop some kind of gratitude practice. And what that's doing, how I do it, is when I wake in the morning and I get my journal out, I write in it, okay, 3 things I'm grateful for are, and then it's whatever the things are. And it can be big things or it can be little things. But what we're doing is we're training our mind to go after the good things in life, to go looking for the good things in life. And when you start down that route, it's easier to stay down that route, versus it would be very easy on many days to just find the bad, particularly as we move into darker, colder, wetter kind of weather as well. So gratitude, massively important, changes how you feel, gives you a real boost, and that changing how you feel changes how you think. So it's got a knock-on effect. And then this last one, just very quickly, is reframing things. Sometimes the thing that's happening is not really the problem very often. It's more what we think it means. And if we can reframe that, change its meaning, that can be really useful. The way we see things in the moment and the way we see things after the event is often very different also. A great example, I remember being in a relationship, that relationship coming to an end, feeling absolutely terrible for a period, thinking it was the worst thing that could have happened to me, but actually it turns out to have been one of the best things that could ever have happened to me, because that relationship wasn't fabulous and the new one that came along at some point thereafter was. So what it seems like in the moment and what it is kind of longer term can be very different. But I think that there's invariably good and bad, and there's a real skill to just thinking, well, this is good because. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think it's a useful skill to develop. So Henry Ford's quote, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're usually right. I think that's kind of really useful, and I think it's much better to think positively than negatively. Very quickly, because I know that we've not got loads of time, but I want to kind of just look at some of the things. These are things we can do. These were things we could do to improve things. What are the key things I see showing up that cause problems with resilience? I've borrowed these from someone called Amy Moran, or at least most of these are from Amy Moran, and she wrote a blog post, 13 things mentally strong people don't do. And so what I want you to do is, as I click through them, I'm not going to spend any time on them. I want you to have a look and think, do I do these things? Because resilience is about doing the good things, more of them, and doing less of the things that are going to erode your resilience. So are you finding that you're feeling sorry for yourself and kind of and ruminating on that? Are you finding that you're casting blame outside of you and giving away your power and your ability to do anything? Well, I can't do anything about this and I can't do anything about that. Well, what can you do something about? Are you resistant to change, would you say? And that's really normal when we're in deep threat or stress. Think of an oak tree, think of a palm tree, think of a storm. The oak tree is going to get kind of hauled up by its branches or broken because it's resistant to that kind of weather that's going on around it. The palm tree bends. So I think we want to kind of, when there's times where change is necessary, we want to try and embrace that as best we can. Are we holding grudges? This is it's more a personal thing, but holding a grudge creates a poor internal physiology. You're not feeling good as a result of that. The other person's not feeling bad, but you're not feeling bad. And so people that hold grudges are far less resilient than people that can let things go. And kind of Buddhism and kind of acceptance and meditation are kind of some examples of how to learn to let things go. And you don't let things go for the other person, you let things go for you so you can feel good. How about how much time kind of or energy do you waste on things you cannot control? Whether that's kind of, or even kind of thinking about kind of things you can't control. Resilient people don't do that. They focus on what they can control. They don't dwell on the past. They do make mistakes, but they don't make the same mistakes. They learn from their mistakes and they don't beat themselves up. Sometimes in competitive fields, we resent others' success, or it might be kind of social media, just comparing ourselves to others. But I think that the way to kind of circumvent this one is that there's this beautiful concept called sympathetic joy, where when we can tap into someone else's successes and feel good for them, we feel good too. So resilient people are not resenting others. They don't expect immediate results, and given the circumstances we're in, then I think that kind of we need to embrace that one. And they're not, and this is such a big one, they're not thinking about what everyone else is thinking of them. Instead, they're thinking, how can I have a good day? How can I live best me? How can I hold myself to a nice high standard, but be kind to myself? If we worry about pleasing others, we are in threat because we can't know what they're going to think of us. And if we can't know, we're uncertain. And as soon as we're uncertain, we're in threat. So it's a real problem for the human race, this one. We're hardwired to do it because it's good for the tribe, but it's not good for us kind of in terms of our experience of living. So worry less about everybody else but instead set your own standards and hold yourself to them. I think of resilience, if I'm giving you kind of like a useful model, a simple model of how to look at it, there are these key components. There's your neurophysiology, which is really relating to the stresses in life. Are you dealing with them? There's your physiology, kind of like what positive things am I putting in? There's your psychology. There's how am I thinking about all of this? These are the big things. And then there's what am I doing? And if you're kind of like taking action then that sends a real clear signal when you're taking action to your central nervous system that you think you can win. Back to the question of, can I predict a favorable outcome again? And if you think you can win, then your central nervous system is going to settle down. So it's deal with the threats, help yourself feel good, learn to improve your thinking one way or another, and take action. So that's how I kind of tend to think of resilience. So when it comes to your own plan, what I would love you to think about is just what from today resonated, what stood out for you. Everyone's going to be a bit different, but what one or two things would be most impactful, do you think, if you were to do them that you're not already doing or stop doing? We talked about the neurophysiology, physiology, so I'll skip past that. It's also, I think, really worth remembering, what do you do well? This isn't being resilient. If you think about this, anyone that's got kind of team members, are we telling them that we're grateful for the work that they did? Are we praising them? Are we praising ourselves? Getting that bit of feedback, getting that bit of praise is the difference between keeping going and giving up. So reliant on others, and that can be even harder when we're working from home. Nobody sees what we're doing. So we've got to think to ourselves, what did I do well today? Again, I think that's important. So write out what one or two things you could do. Make it really simple and take those steps. Knowledge equals power is something that's been bandied about, but knowledge on its own is not power. Knowledge on its own is normally just pain, because you think, well, I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. It's knowledge plus action that's going to change things. And I want to leave you with that thought that your resilience is actually far more within your influence than you think. It's not something that's just happening by chance. There is very much a formula for it, and there's something you can do about it. So Heather, I think I've obviously spoken quickly for long. Can I hand this over to you? I'll come out of screen sharing and we'll see if there's any questions.
Thanks very much, Gordon. That was great. We've got no questions in the chat at the moment. Has anyone got anything that they'd like to ask just now? We've still got 6 minutes.
I'll see if I can find the chat window.
You're still screen sharing, Gordon. I don't know if you're intending to be.
That's probably going to help. If I go back to here, is that the one? I'm not, okay, there's the button. Right, so that's bringing me back to here. There's chat. All right. I'm not inundated with questions.
Which is probably a good thing since we've only got 6 minutes left.
No, absolutely. Anyone got anything?
Questions or comments or anything like that?
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, William. Elaine, thank you. Yes, I do have a list of resources. I'm going to package up this presentation as a PDF, and there will be some hyperlinks on that will take you to book recommendations, further videos, that kind of thing. And yes, William, I think considering your hedonic tone is a great idea. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Len. Roma, thank you. Kirsty. Good. Glad you guys liked it. I know I spoke very quickly. I had a lot. Very grateful for the kind comments, people. That will help my resilience. You're welcome, Diane. This is the first time I've ever read a list of comments and just been speaking to the comments, Heather.
That's my doorbell going, so I'm going to go and get my doorbell.
I can't believe that. Thank you, David. You're welcome, Gail. Very polite bunch. I like that. Guys, there is a list of videos. I purposefully, because I wanted to get big picture, I couldn't go into lots of depth in some of the areas, but the areas are key. So in the video kind of section with the hyperlinks, some of these concepts are really expanded upon, so there's a lot more detail there. And yes, as Heather had said earlier, if any of you want to ask me any kind of questions directly, then it is gordon@thehappinessguy.co.uk. I am not naturally happy. I am very much a work in progress at that. People kind of tend to think that I am just kind of this naturally happy, bubbly person. Nope. If it wasn't for all the practices that I was sharing with you earlier, I can be positively grumpy, and that's definitely true. So, yeah, I hope you found it useful. All right, and sharing resilience cocktails. Yes, indeed. I wonder, we've got 2 minutes. What's your, for anyone that's kind of still listening, what do you think is the thing that you do best from that helps your resilience? Or what one thing would resonate for you? Or could you, or do you think helps your resilience the most? Maybe something you're already doing. Oh, that's too personal though, isn't it? Yeah, maybe.
I'll go. Break the ice. I think for me, the progress thing really resonated with me, because I find that makes a difference. Like, my workload really dropped at the start of lockdown, and I started a course at that time because it really freaked me out that I didn't have enough work to do, and I was like, what am I going to do? I've got no work and I can't go anywhere and I can't do anything, and I'm just going to be static, and that feeling of stasis really jars me. So I think it's that progress thing, that I need to feel like I'm moving forward on something all the time, or it really unsettles me.
It's so human. It's like evolution is progress, you know. So if we're not making any progress, then we've got this. There's a void, and it's not pleasant. And I think someone else. That's why I think courses are great. If someone else can come up with okay, Heather, here's what you just need to do. You can then just engage. You take that one action, engage in the course. And all of a sudden it's progress, kind of, it helps, it helps a lot. So, and some of the others are kind of, so exercise seems to be a favorite, connecting with others, not caring about what other people think. I love that one. Moving forward, even if slowly, absolutely. So lots of good things, all right. Well, anyone that wants to ask any questions can do. They can kind of email me, as I say, gordon@thehappinessguy.co.uk. Otherwise, should we let people get off for now, Heather?
Yeah, I think so. That's us at 3 o'clock. So we'll say goodbye to everyone. And thanks very much, Gordon.
Entirely a pleasure. I'll hopefully see you soon. And thank you everyone for coming along, paying attention, and your kind words. Great to see you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.